What do you predict this gonna look like in the future? I know we don't know, but
Yeah.
what are some of the trends we're moving towards?
So I've started using AI more than ever in the last few weeks, and I've really intensively started vibe coding. Vibe coding is basically coding, but just using, let's say, Cursor
Uh,
or Windsurf. And by using these tools, I'm able to generate real code that's working on the front end, and I do it just by myself as a product designer. I don't have to be a developer. And this really opened my eyes into actually thinking, okay, is this tool going to replace me? Is it going to replace a front-end designer? What does this look like?
I'd like to welcome you to the Corner Office Chronicles podcast. My name is Byron Benton, affectionately known as Byron the Product Enthusiast. This is dedicated to product management and entrepreneurship. So please, lend an ear, perhaps two. Tune into today's episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Corner Office Chronicles podcast. My name is Byron Benton, and I am your host. Today, I have a special guest, very international, very successful. You may have seen him styling and profiling around LinkedIn, maybe not, but this guy really knows about product. So here we go. If you don't mind, I'd like to welcome Mr. David Zelinsky. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, doing great.
Thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks.
Yeah. So if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been what got you into product design, strategy, etc.?
Yeah, sure. I've been in product design for almost 3 years now, and actually over 3 years now. And my entire journey started in architecture. I've always thought I would end up in architecture and work in architecture, but very quickly I noticed that I'm more into the design realm in terms of tech, like tech. So I really wanted to work in tech, combine design and tech, also had an eye for business. So that's how I ended up in product design, now kind of doing a little bit of product strategy in the same time. So that's how I got myself into the position that I am.
Okay. So what did you like better, architecture or design? Which one strikes your fancy more?
Yeah, I definitely prefer product design, of course. I mean, architecture has always been one of my interests. However, I love tech and the ability to actually scale in tech, all the different options you have for opportunities in your career, also growing a business in tech and different products. So I would definitely say that I feel more comfortable in product design. Maybe not even necessarily just design in itself, but also product strategy and product management. I'm really interested in those topics and like the workarounds behind how an app actually comes to actually being created and how a company it comes about in creating its own virtual app.
Okay. So take us back to your first job. Did you learn a lot? Is that one where you failed? There's a lot of times people fail and they learn. That's where they learn a lot of their stuff. Out the first job, what are some of the biggest lessons you learned?
Yeah. So when I joined my first job, it was actually, I mean, before product design, I worked in architecture a little bit in internships. And then I started in product design as an intern. And in the same company, I went from intern to junior to mid to senior. So it was a very big journey from the beginning to really growing a lot throughout that time. And I learned a lot in the beginning. I did not really know what I was doing. I knew what product design was. I thought I knew what I was doing. And then every single day I found out that, okay, I think I'm messing some things up. However, with time, I definitely gained the confidence into knowing that, okay, I have a roadmap for myself, I have a workflow. And after following that, learning from my mistakes and learning from some of the best people I've known in the game in terms of product design and developers, I really started to feel very confident in what I was doing on a day-to-day basis at work.
Okay.
So I think I have to definitely contribute most of my success and what I've learned thanks to my mentors and my previous jobs. I think that's definitely a very helpful thing to have people that actually can teach you based off their own mistakes and what they've learned throughout the years.
Okay. So let's speak about design for a moment. What is good design to you? If you had to put it in words, what fits the criteria of good design?
Yeah. I wouldn't really say that design has to be the prettiest. It definitely has to be functional. It has to do its job. So if you have a product where you're going into a web app or a website, you should know what you're doing on that website. You should know exactly what it is. what value it's bringing you and also what you should be doing, and it should feel natural. So I think good design in product is just being able to easily go through the flow without even having to think about what you're supposed to do. Like, let's say if you're going into a banking app, you should be able to very quickly create an e-transfer, search your history, and not have to get stuck in the app. So good design is intuitive design.
Okay. Okay. So now that we have this great design, how important do you think that is to the MVP? And when you think of MVP, I've heard some people say, look at MVP as an MVP. I also heard people say, look at the first design as a real design, and they were just going to work on it. Now it's just not much of a difference, but it's still a minute difference. What's your take on it?
Yeah, of course. In terms of building an MVP is just supposed to be minimal, the minimal viable product. So I wouldn't say it has to be perfect. Definitely not. When you're creating a startup or a new company, you can quite easily find good practices and copy them into your own product. It's actually quite easy nowadays to either use AI or just ready-made templates to really build out a very good looking and functional design without having to put in too much effort. So thanks to the current set of tools we have online, it's very easy to do that. So I would say that we should focus more in an MVP on just serving the key functionality and validating if it even makes sense. Some people will jump into creating a company and think it should be something huge, grand, it should have all these features. But no, in the beginning, you have to just test if anyone is even interested in the product. Because you go into building an MVP with a hypothesis. So what you have to do is validate the hypothesis and make sure that you're going in the right track, or if you should maybe pivot.
Okay, okay. What do you think about the discovery process? Any tips on a great discovery process?
Yeah, of course. Some product designers forget to do enough discovery before they jump into ideation. I think that's really the main difference between like a junior and a senior product designer. Is really how much time and effort you put into discovery. So before you create any kind of design, you have to really understand what is the key source of the issue that you're trying to solve. So is it something really minimal? Can we really create a quick change in the UI and it'll solve our issue? Or maybe is there something underlying behind that? Maybe users actually have an issue that should be fixed on the back end and not necessarily on the front end in the interface. So discovery is definitely an important process just to truly understand what is the issues that our users are facing and how we can solve it. Not necessarily going to design, but just mapping it out, maybe creating user flows, looking at information architecture. Very often, the best changes in the interface is actually not even done on the interface. It's just simply shortening flows and automating processes, which is also done on the back end.
Okay, okay. All right. Great answer. What you spoke about quickness, and that brings me to the point of speed. What is more important when it comes to getting a product to the market? You mentioned not getting everything that doesn't necessarily need to be right at first, but if you had to pick, would you prefer speed or quality, or is there a trade-off? Or maybe 80% this, 20% this, maybe 50% this, 50% this, 60% this, 40% this. Well, what's your opinion on that?
Of course. Yeah, definitely there's a trade-off. If you go into speed, you always lose on quality. I mean, not always necessarily it has to be that drastic, but usually you focus on one thing. It's like speed or the quality. If you're creating a new startup, a new company, and you're trying to validate a hypothesis, I would say that probably want to focus a little bit more on the speed than the quality. I would say, let's say, I don't know, 80% speed, 20% quality. You want to test if your idea even makes sense. You don't have to make it perfect. You don't have to spend time on it. Just try to get on the market as quickly as possible. And as it sits on the market, if you see there's some traction, you can start, adding more and more to the product. You can create small iterations, small releases, and add those tiny little bits here and there. However, if you want to do it quickly and not spend too much money, because again, creating a company or a new product is a big investment. So you don't want to put too much capital into something that will not actually function and bring back any kind of return on that investment. So by quite quickly setting up a product which can just validate that, you can focus on the speed rather than the quality. So even if you're employing, let's say, developers, maybe it's better to focus on just getting it shipped rather than having the perfect code. Of course, it's important to look at technical debt and have that all structured in the beginning. However, again, if we're not even sure if the product is going to make sense in the market, then why spend so much time and money on making it perfect? We can actually Think about having a little bit of messier code, messier structure, messier design. And then with time, we can change those proportions. So as we see that there is some capital rolling in, there are some users, we have some traction. Okay, this makes sense. We can focus on maybe slowing down a little bit and increasing the quality. So when we actually scale that business, and we know it makes sense to scale that business, we'll have a better foundation in terms of design, say design system and organization in our files and documentation and for development, so we don't have as much technical debt and the code is clean.
Okay. So we spoke about maybe a little infrastructure doesn't necessarily have to be the best at the beginning, but let's say if someone starts a project app and they're using Google Cloud, maybe Firebase, and they're creating this MVP that maybe they only have 1,000 people or maybe even 10,000 people. At what point do you think they should start scaling and putting a little bit more money towards the particular project? Should they go all out AWS or whatever they're going to use, or is some of the smaller tools better, or should they invest more at the beginning? What do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely say to invest as little as you can in the very beginning. You don't want to put too much capital in something that you might not get any return in. So try to spend as little as possible, but it all really depends on the situation and the type of company you're creating. Let's say if you're the only investor, you're not seeking outside, external investors, then again, your capital will be limited, so you want to spend less. If you're very confident in the product, you maybe did some user research, you have some data that is backing your hypothesis, and you also have some shareholders, maybe you also have some external investment capital, then you can be a little bit more comfortable with actually investing more. But what I would actually recommend is in the beginning, setting some expectations for ourselves. So before we even invest anything, give ourselves some guidelines. So, okay, like there's a limit. I will, let's say, spend no more than $5,000, $10,000, how much you want to. Just kind of have that in your mind and even document it somewhere. So you know exactly how much you're willing to invest before you even create the product, and then set some kind of key results for yourself. So let's say, okay, I'll decide to invest 5,000 more if I reach 1,000 users. Then I'll be able to actually control myself and see that, okay, I got 200 users, maybe this is not making sense. I'm not going to invest just yet until I reach that first benchmark. So I think just setting expectations for yourself and also assessing your situation and how actually confident you can be in that idea and hypothesis that you had, the better you can actually prepare yourself for an investment.
Okay, so what if you create this thing just overnight before you even had chance to even really think about scaling or whatever? You went from 0 users to getting an influencer involved or whatever, and now you have 100,000 users, and it breaks. How would you handle that? How would you, if it did break, how would you, I guess, maintain those particular customers and not worry about them going to someone else? Because people have a short attention span.
Of course, there is always the risk of having such kind of momentum, and you can never expect it. So preparing for that is very difficult, I do have to say. From like a product design perspective, whenever I design something or create something, always look at the potential of what it could turn out in the future. So I don't design it just for now. I design it with the vision of what it could look like in 2-3 years. So if we scale it, the design right now, what we have right now, the app can be scalable. That's something you have to remember about. If you're just creating a first MVP, okay, you're focusing on just what's right now, but just keep it in your mind what it could look like in 3, 4, 5 years. Keep it very simple. You can just have a documented or very simple design of what your blue sky, like perfect vision of your product can be. So you're more prepared to scale in the future. And if we're working with developers, also just keep that conversation open of, what would happen if we actually had a lot more users than we were expecting, and how we can quickly fix this. Like, let's say we achieve so many users that our app crashes, then what kind of quick actions will we be able to take if that ever occurs? And of course, there's always the risk that it might crash, we won't be able to fix it, there'll be bugs and they will leave us. But I think that just building a really good name for your brand and really offering something solid, if you are unique enough and your users really want to use your platform, even if it breaks and something happens, they usually still come back. So maintaining a good relationship with your users and also having, let's say, some kind of mailing system, having contact with those users, having their emails, having their phone numbers, it's also a good point to actually be able to then gain those customers back, even if they temporarily leave.
Okay. how important do you think collaboration is? Because you're a designer, right? Product designer.
Yeah.
How important do you think collaboration is with your different teams? Do you interact with a lot of product managers, engineers? Who do you mainly interact with, and how important is collaboration?
Of course, there's like, I would say two types of collaboration. So collaboration with people who are very similar to you in terms of your role, and collaborating with people who are completely outside of your circle. So from those that are inside my circle, I would say are product managers and product designers who work on very similar topics. And those outside of the circle would be, let's say, developers who maybe have a lot of different interests and they speak a completely different language than I do. It's very important to collaborate with both, because once you collaborate with your like direct circle, you can see how they work and how their workflows actually look like, so you can learn from them. It's really good and really important to share your learned experiences, from the failures to the successes, and really see how you can take some of those good practices and utilize them in your own work. So by collaborating with other product designers and product managers, I actually learned a lot, even especially in the last few months. Just even asking the question of, hey, how are you using AI in your workflow, has really opened my eyes into how I can change my work. And I thought that being product designer with over 3 years of experience, already becoming a senior, I thought that maybe I kind of reached a certain limit. Maybe there's, how much more can I actually learn? And when you're stuck in one company for a longer time and you feel like you're not learning as much, maybe you're not learning from other people, sometimes you need to kind of look at other circles. Let's say you can either change companies, you can talk to other product designers in other companies, to other roles. It can really open up your eyes. So I've learned a lot throughout the last few months from other product managers and designers, and it has shown me really what work can look like. And I've completely changed what my workflow looks like on a day-to-day basis, which I'm very shocked that it has changed so quickly. But it just can show you that there's still so much to learn from. And in terms of those external circles, it's very, very important to collaborate with people who are very much different from you. Because if you are a product designer and you don't ever talk to developers, you're never going to truly understand what it looks like from a technical perspective. You're always going to be locked in your world of design, and you're always going to think you want to create the perfect thing. But the more you talk with people who are outside of that circle, you realize what the different restraints are. And maybe someone else will look at design and a wireframe completely different. So it's always good to communicate and collaborate with other people, as it always just opens up your mind and shows you that maybe your decision, maybe your idea wasn't the best.
Okay.
Even when I create wireframes, I love to talk with developers. Sometimes they have crazy ideas, but often they end up actually being very good ideas and inspiring me to create more. So definitely.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about strategy for a minute. How important is strategy when it comes to creating this product? So let's say we have this great product. It's scaled perfectly, it's scaling perfectly, and that's with no strategy. How important is strategy?
Strategy is very important. What I've noticed is I've worked in multiple products where I was there from the very beginning when they were created, some that were already existing and were just being scaled upwards. And I noticed that whenever there isn't a clear strategy, it ends up not being the best investment. The client, usually there's someone paying for the development, for the product, someone deciding on the actual budget. And when there is no strategy, you end up in a situation where the owner of the platform, the client, is constantly investing in a team of developers, a product designer, but there's no real progress happening. The product is just kind of stagnant, it's existing, okay, it's fine, it's scaling, but very slowly. And sometimes there's situations where, okay, we're making a big launch, a big change, there's something big happening. But sometimes some people forget to think about, okay, but what happens next? We all have this one deadline. Okay, we know what we're going to do. We're going to release this new feature on the 1st of next month. And we don't actually think about, okay, but what do we do to prepare ourselves for the upcoming months? So it's sometimes good to have a little bit of a buffer zone to kind of take a breath, look at what we did, learn from our mistakes, fix some bugs that are happening, reduce technical debt. But it's always important to have a strategy in mind, not only what we are going to do in the next upcoming months, but also in the upcoming years. It's very fundamental to have a vision, because if you have a product vision and you know what your product is supposed to achieve in the upcoming future, in the next years or decades, then your team, the employees in the company, can further on solidify that vision. And when they believe in that vision, not only are they going to work better in the company, but also their ideas are going to help you propel your company in the right direction. So it's very important to it's very important to have a clear vision for your product, but also short-term goals.
Okay. Now you had a chance to see plenty of mistakes in your career when it comes to strategy, I imagine. Dealing with different teams, different designers, different product teams. What are some of the common mistakes you've seen?
Yeah, I think when I think about mistakes, I suppose one of the biggest ones is probably lack of communication.
Mm.
So sometimes it's the product designer and product manager who are deciding on the strategy. Sometimes it'll just be the product designer and the client. Usually there is one group that is in some way left out of the conversation. And when you leave one of those groups out, you often end up sort of regretting that because let's say you're leaving out the developers from actually participating in the product strategy. You might find out that, okay, you had this beautiful plan, everything was established, but you did not take into consideration the reality of actually technically implementing it and some other restraints from, let's say, technical debt or other factors that have to be resolved first before we head into further scaling. So I would say that like lack of communication is probably the biggest ones. And just being clear and upfront about the changes and what's happening in the company. So even just publishing a little small update, let's say every week on a channel, whether or not you're communicating on Slack or in the office, it's important just to inform everyone what's happening, let's say every week, every 2 weeks, so everyone's on board and knows what's happening until they don't find out at the last minute, and then everything can just fall apart.
Okay. So how do you stay sharp and inspired, when it comes to product design and product in general?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me personally, I love external resources. So, it's very important just to kind of keep on reading, keep learning. So, whether or not that's going on Twitter or going on LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever it is to gain new knowledge, it's really important just to see what's going on with other people within that space that you're working in. So, if you're a product designer, it's really important to see what the top product designers in the world are doing. So what product designers in Apple are doing, in Google, what these companies are doing with their product design, what trends they're following, but also see what maybe other niche product designers are doing. Maybe talk to other people. That's really important. I love reaching out to people on LinkedIn when I have someone. Sometimes they message me, sometimes I message them, and we just start a conversation going. We're talking about how AI might replace our jobs, what we can do, how we can use AI. And it really opens up our eyes and we get inspired from each other. So just kind of staying in these communities, that's very important. And not only talking one-to-one, but also joining communities. So what I've actually started in Toronto is going to events from Friends of Figma. And those are events that are hosted for people that basically use the same software that we use in terms of developing products in Figma. And we discuss different topics of how we landed our jobs, what challenges we're facing. And it's really good to be in a community because you can then see how other people are evolving. And if you can see that maybe you're lacking behind, then that's an indication that, okay, you should be learning more. You should kind of take on some good practices and check out what's going on the market. So just learning, being communities. And even right now, I'm a product designer, but I'm doing my MBA. And it's not necessary for me. It's not a requirement, but I just want to learn. I want to keep on going forward and I want to broaden my horizons. I want to understand, okay, I'm building an app, I'm designing an app, but why is it this way? Like, why is the business leaning towards this direction? What are the goals within the company? How did this startup how was it even created? So I'm just always curious. I'm always open-minded. And I think just gaining more knowledge never hurts. And you never actually reach in your lifetime a moment where you have too much knowledge. So you just have to keep on learning.
Yeah. What do you think the future of product design and even strategy is? I was speaking with someone the other day and they spoke about no code, low code. Do you think some of these tools are the future or even AI, for instance?
Because there is an important human factor to this entire scenario. So if there's a big corporation, even a smaller company, someone actually needs to make a decision and needs to be there to actually evaluate what AI is generating. So, I mean, I understand that AI is becoming more and more intelligent. It can really recommend brilliant things. But at the end of the day, someone has to be there to communicate that with the company, gain a discussion momentum. And there is this human factor that AI cannot replace. And although all these companies are hyped up about AI, it doesn't replace a conversation, a meeting, And simply what it does, it just makes our work faster, quicker. So, I mean, I think it's actually amazing with these AI tools. I've been creating prototypes in AI, and instead of creating it in Figma, coding, making a prototype, and then asking developers to check if it's possible, I can just create it in code straight away. And I think that generally it'll be harder for people who do not use AI. So if you want to stay in your career, if you want to actually like grow and be successful, you have to learn these tools. You cannot stay behind and be traditional and that you always use the same software. You have to really look at what others are doing on the market and hop on the bandwagon before it's too late. So I don't think that that'll be really a risk with product designers being replaced for product managers. It'll just be that there'll be probably less product designers and product managers, but those who actually use AI and who are very efficient at what they do, they'll definitely stay.
You think it's possible for an enterprise company that has 10,000 employees to only need 2,000 employees though?
I don't think so. No, it's not that drastic.
3,000?
I was actually
It's
speaking
gonna
with
cut it
someone quite
down.
recently, and we were discussing that there's still a very limited capacity of how much work someone can take on themselves, even with AI. Okay, AI can make you more efficient, but how much? Not 500%. You're not going to run the entire company by yourself just because you have a few AI agents. There's always going to have to be someone who's in charge of certain parts of a platform. AI is very complex and it's a great tool. So it's not a replacement, it's a tool. But then we as humans, we're not growing in efficiency really that much. Like our brains are limited. We only have so much context we can, keep and we can analyze. So definitely, although there might be less employees, it will probably, in my opinion, will definitely not be such a drastic change as from, I don't know, 10,000 to 2,000 employees.
Yeah.
Maybe from 10,000 to 9,000, maybe that's more realistic. But even with that, I would be skeptical whether or not that would happen.
Yeah.
I feel like the change that'll be more visible is that the product releases will be coming more and more frequent, and there'll be less bugs and issues on production.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping too. One thing about AI is there's a certain quality. I wonder if we're going to focus more on quality of the search and the prompts as well, because one person might put this in, but then another person might put this in, and this person that puts this in might get more quality content based on his prompt. So
yeah,
I think that's going to be big business too,
For sure. I can already see that prompt engineering is very important. And that's why it's also important just to stay communicated with others and see how they are creating their prompts. Comparing prompts and results really opens up your eyes into terms of how you should be writing your prompts. Definitely the result is not the same. You have to really know how to use AI to get good results. Because if you're not experienced and you're not doing it right, AI will not be as useful as you think it will be.
All right. Great answers, sir. So do you have any advice for any future product designers, strategic people that are involved in strategy, product in general? Any advice for them?
Yeah, I would say that first of all, you should keep your eyes and mind open to what all different parts of the company look like that you'll be working in. So whether or not you're starting as a product designer or you're a junior or mid and you want to grow further, you have to really look at the entire perspective of who's in your company and who's doing what. So not just stay locked in product design, you're doing UX or UI, just designing and passing it off. Actually communicate with others and ask them, what does development look like? How do product managers work? How does the CEO operate? You have to really understand little bits here and there to properly then perform as a product designer. So I think that just understanding the different inner workings of the company and just generally business administration is an important part. But also keep people that are very talented close to you. If you see that someone is successful, that's kind of what I've done always in my career, is when I see that someone is really, really successful, they're getting the best compliments at work, they're so efficient, they're the best, I try to have a good relationship with them. I try to see what they're doing. I ask them a lot of questions. I try to shadow what they do, their meetings. I look into the materials, how they're preparing it. So really try to learn from the best. And even if you're not working just yet in that role, let's say as a product designer, you can always reach out. So whether or not that's seeking a mentor on either ADP list or just finding someone on LinkedIn, messaging them, asking them questions, that's always a great source to really get a lot of knowledge and feedback from people who are simply experienced. So I feel like that's the main contributing factor to how I've been able to grow so quickly is just learning from others and staying close with my mentors.
Okay. If anyone wants to reach out to you, how can they do so?
Of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think that's the best source of networking and finding me anywhere on my socials. You can always visit my website. That's davzur.com, davzur.com, but also on ADP list. If anyone's starting out in product design, they want to kind of learn how product design and development should look like, product strategy, you can always book a free session with me on ADP list and we can chat.
Okay. Mr. David Zwisky, pleasure to meet you, sir. Thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Thank you so much.
So thanks for watching today's episode of the Corner Office Chronicles podcast. Again, my name is Byron Benton, and I am your host, affectionately known as Byron the Product Enthusiast. Please like, subscribe, and tune in. Until the next time, thanks for watching.